Back in the mid-80s, being engrossed in the glistening hue of your CRT TV showcasing The Legend of Zelda must have felt otherworldly. Thrown to the wilds, it's up to you to find a way to survive. As Miyazaki himself said, comparisons between that legend and Souls made him feel deeply unworthy, stating that Zelda is the textbook inspiring all modern action games. If the resounding cry of media and fans alike is heard, you've heralded in an era for a new legend. Elden Ring is the single greatest adventure game I've ever played. Never before has an open world felt so purposeful and meaningful every step of the way. Unparalleled freedom of exploration and progression. Unapologetic challenge that demands extreme effort and willpower. Boundless intrigue and rewards around every corner, all shaping the character upon which you define your ascent to become the Elden Lord. It is an unforgettable masterpiece. The Herculean challenge of Elden Ring all crescendos into titanic battles against great enemies, demigods, and even legends. Today, I'll begin sharing my ranking of their difficulty in part 1 of 2, because there are a lot of bosses in Elden Ring. By my count, there are 33 unique bosses, not to mention 45 unique mini-bosses. Before we begin, some caveats. I am defining full-fledged bosses as great enemies felled. Any enemies felled are mini-bosses and will be ranked in a separate video. To evaluate difficulty as fairly as I could, I never use summons or the summon ashes. And finally, this is based solely on my personal experience and opinion. I'm eager to hear how you fared in the world of Elden Ring, so don't hesitate to sound off in the comments. Without further ado, here's my ranking of the Elden Ring bosses from easiest to hardest. Number 33, Mimic Tear. The easiest boss of Elden Ring immediately hammers in another Zelda comparison. Dark Link in a game with near limitless build possibility? Yes please. What a fantastic concept. This blob can morph into whatever you're currently equipped with, making it special every time you encounter it. As cool as that may be, there are some significant flaws when it comes to difficulty. No one knows better than you the strengths and limitations of your own build. Challenge against the toughest foes comes from a vast moveset you have to recognize, learn, and react to. By the time I found this mimic, I knew my own better than anyone. This is setting aside that NPC PvP fights tend to be predictable and exploitable. Speaking of taking advantage, while I wasn't able to test it for myself, couldn't you theoretically walk in naked, then full swap to a regular gear set? A hilarious proposition, yet not necessary since you're gonna blow through it with ease. At least it made an effort to spam the weapon art and showed me how rusty my parry skills are. Nonetheless, even if I'm giddy at the novelty from a quality standpoint, Mimic Tear is bottom of the barrel for difficulty. Number 32, Fia's Champions. From one NPC style fight to another, one that barely scrapes past Mimic Tear. I only give it the slight edge due to 5 combatants over a solo battle. And at least you don't immediately know their moves. That said, their HP was more brittle than journalists' arguments for an easy mode. In fact, I quit out and equipped a less upgraded weapon, and I still mopped the floor with them. Further against their favor, they spawn in 3 waves. Beat the first, get plenty of time to reset and heal, then bonk the sorcerer, then a trio spawns, which you can easily time and delete one immediately. Considering this gank mob of garbage safeguards a far more engaging boss, it's a little less offensive, but that makes it no less of a forgettable flex of your strength over Fia's failures. Number 31, Regal Ancestor Spirit. This regal reindeer faces you in the plane of its dreams, a location you would think brings out your most fearsome self. If this is all you could muster, your imagination is sorely lacking. If only you spent your time prancing through the sky coming up with some kind of winning strategy. When grounded, it'll do some headbutts and horsey kicks, nothing a hardened veteran of reindeer fuckland can't handle. Its sky dances are accompanied by spiritual spit that is trivial to avoid, and an eventual dive back to booty smackin' central. I used a Great Club +8 with my endgame stats, and it ruined Christmas in the blink of an eye. Later I faced the Regal variant, who drops a Remembrance. The only noticeable difference was the ability to light up and heal itself. Perhaps there was more to the battle. Who knows, it's not really relevant if it can't stay standing to show it off. This fight has beautiful scenery, an elegant soundtrack, and great build-up fighting through an underground haven against spiritual enemies to light torches and resurrect the beast's spirit. While it may have spectacular atmosphere, its battle prowess is barely more imposing than the wildlife in the overworld. Number 30, Magma Wyrm. My first encounter with the covetous lava slug was in the mines to end cap the upgrade material treasure trove. It was my second, leaving me thrilled Stone Digger Troll wasn't fated to be my adversary every time. Turns out while the Control-V paste keys aren't as worn as the giant, Magma Wyrm appears quite a lot, giving you ample opportunity to see for yourself again, and again, and again how this pathetic excuse for a dragon has little to offer. It slithers around leaving trails of lava as you whack away. It has a sword, but other than a slamming AoE telegraph from a mile away, and a big 180 swipe to combat booty smacking, it's mostly for show. To think I compared you to covetous demon. At least Jabba could roll over. It wasn't until later that I found the Makar variant that I realized he's not all slug. He stood tall and barfed on his sword to light it ablaze. Lovely. They say it's the thought that counts, but it didn't do him a whole lot of good. Since big bosses tend to stay staggered for a long time for a riposte, I found it better to attack spam while he was stunned, which conveniently deleted the majority of that theoretically more difficult second phase. I did find him a few more times, noticeably once when I was able to be on horseback. With more space to work with and higher defense, he did pose a bit more of a threat. He could obliterate Torrent in a single blow, leaving you vulnerable. Even so, I was able to make short work of him by aiming for the rear to avoid his sword assaults. For a long time, this was my choice for the easiest, but Magma Wyrm showed enough fight in my later encounters to dodge bottom honors. Number 29, Leonine Misbegotten. So, you know how your mind can wander as much as your feet when exploring? I saw the Bridge of Sacrifice to the Weeping Peninsula when something else caught my eye, and promptly forgot about it until the endgame. Reaching Leonine far beyond his capabilities, and having faced him plenty in the overworld and other places that shall not yet be named, I was quite ready to face him. Let's just say that in those other encounters he typically had help, and it's pretty obvious why. Despite high aggression and closing speed, he's staggerable. For his strength build, that means the alarms are ringing for pancake o'clock. Or at least waffle time. Watching him waffle out of stances as you wail blindly means both avoiding damage and inflicting more of your own. Nullifying him as a threat and battering his HP in one fell swoop is brutal. For what it's worth, I used a very lowly upgraded weapon, yet it still didn't matter. He feels far more like a mini-boss. A take probably shaped by encountering him as a mini-boss in a gank battle with the perfumer buffing him way before this. When he has an ally to give you another element to worry about, he's actually kind of fearsome. The range on that sword is no joke, and for an early game boss, his attack timings have odd delays and variable delivery speed. For that reason, I can imagine him being enough of an early game struggle to merit not being the absolute easiest, but it's not enough to keep him out of the lowly bottom 5. Number 28, Flying Dragon Agheel. The difficulty of the dragon is admittedly skewed for me. It's the same moveset and design from the network test. With fighting experience under my belt, I knew everything to expect and take advantage. I had begun using the golden halberd of the tree sentinel at +2, and it sliced through him like butter. Horseback largely nullifies any danger this fight can offer. Simply hang out next to the wings or legs and bash away. It doesn't do as much damage as the head, but it's not insignificant compared to the design of something like Medir or Amygdala. Doing this typically baits stomps that are easy to avoid if you aren't overly greedy, which I, for one, would never be. Even if you falter or fall victim to his 180 spin, or swiping head chomps or stomps, the lower overall danger preserves your healing resources. His fire attacks, on the other hand, do need to be respected. He can fly up straight and force you out with a long breath forward, or fly to the side, making the entire horizontal array in front of him unsafe. He has a shake-up where he flies up, and then instead of fire, slams down after a moment. As long as you ride backward, this is an easy opportunity for some head slaps. And that's all there is to it. There are a half dozen variants of Agheel across the lands between. Smaragd can fire soul arrows in lieu of breath, Adula can swoop and swipe with a huge magic greatsword, Exeek's roars to create a fog of scarlet rot around you, an ailment similar to Toxic, dramatically reducing your HP over time, which is just delightful. Borealis can do much the same with Frostbite, an ailment increasing your damage taken. Both versions also add after effects to their stomps for further status danger, and Grail is Agheel with far more power on a bridge, a really cool setting to fight this dragon. The narrow area makes lateral horse movement and therefore evasion a lot more difficult, better highlighting his moveset. I appreciate all the shakeups in design to keep things fresh, and I do enjoy the battle overall. That doesn't remove viable strategies to nullify a lot of his offensive capabilities, making it one of the easier bosses in Elden Ring. Number 27, Sir Gideon Offnir, the All-Knowing! You know those sorcery builds people develop in the late game that start to embarrass bosses? Gideon tried to do the same to me for the audacity to even think I could become the Elden Lord. I now know what it feels like to be a melee forward boss against spell spammers. Gideon shows how imposing it can be. A dozen homing soul arrows, monstrous shots that chunk half of my long dong vitality, a flaming skull that creates a danger line and obscures vision, blood flame tosses, scarlet rose rot slams, and on top of it all, the fellow Tarnish can do the crimson chug-a-lug to undo all of your efforts. This game had an affinity for NPC PvP style fights, as I've somewhat showcased already. It's not my favorite, but Gideon pulled it off admirably. Unfortunately for him, I recently got mollywopped by a certain goddess who used that very Scarlet Blossom. If you go within its range, it inflicts rot, keeping the host at its center safe from melee assaults. Cue my triple shot crossbow to shove a little bleed up their butt, and now we're hemorrhaging. The sole difficulty in facing Offnir comes from getting an opening to attack. His magical bonanza has limited gaps. Finding them takes a little ingenuity, but once you do, you can make quick work of him. Step aside, old man. Despite your misgivings, I'm on my way to become the new Elden Lord. Meanwhile, your respectable effort earns you a below average difficulty nod. Number 26, Astel, Natural Born of the Void. Surely what Orphan of Kos would have grown up to be. I mean, look at that face. They're cousins at the very least. Unfortunately for Astel, Orphan drained all the oppressive difficulty out of the gene pool. Rather than a suite of shrimp slam and melee, this great wannabe favors using its size, accompanying range, and a lot of gravity-based AoEs. These include a sweep leaving a layer of AoEs in its wake, a slam generating a ground AoE that pulsates 3 to 4 times, swelling in size with each blast, a wicked fast gravity spear from a distance with a long charge time, a full-on aura of gravity used to crush you, a personal AoE around the boss that doubles as a teleport. Make sure to be aware of your surroundings for that one when he reappears, since Astel loves to combo that into a grab. Getting further into the battle offers a rain of meteors, reminiscent of the normal versions you see throughout the underground regions, and at close range, it uses its pincers to keep you at bay. Thing is, most of this is reasonable to reliably deal with. It's all well paced with solid gaps for you to crush the head in between. Even if you can't hit the weak spot, the body is so large you'll surely have a target at all times. Where Astel gets the advantage is his mobility in relation to the arena size. Teleporting away forces you out, making you deal with ranged assaults until you can get back in. Even when you do, it favors the ground sweeps and slams that make AoEs to dodge, which can be tricky. You need to dodge the initial hit, but also be ready to dodge the after effects. This is a common theme we'll be seeing throughout a lot of the more difficult bosses in the game. While Astel has shades of that, the downtime, more moderate HP and damage output, and big target makes for a more middle-of-the-road encounter. Yes, I should mention we are getting to more of an average difficulty level already. Only at 26, we've already left the realm of the few truly easy bosses in Elden Ring. Number 25, Dragonkin Soldier. My first encounter with this draconian grunt was on unfair terms. I didn't discover him until I was roughly 90% through the main path of the game with a fully upgraded weapon. As you can see, the result was devastating. To evaluate more of the battle, I fisted him for a bit, then swapped to a large club +2. Even if I get my own offensive capabilities, just bear with me. For the first half, I rarely got hit. His waves of electricity are handled well through sprint or basic roll spam, though sprinting seemed the better option so you could close the gap. Once you reach him, sitting under him isn't the best choice either. While it's the first instinct, it leads to a lot of slams directly under it. I found it better to bait his long arm pushes, then move into the hip or rear. This evades most of his lunges, leaving you offensive freedom. When I made the menu swap to the club, that's when I ran into difficulties. Once you're in his range, you can play on your terms at the hip. Getting back there is easier said than done. Those lengthy punches are backed by a massive hitbox. I enjoyed the design of getting in being the struggle, while savvy positioning away from his frontal slams allowed for potent offense. It was dynamic the whole way through, making it similar to Astel, much more engaging than anything thus far. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how fun it is on horseback. Those lengthy blows are equally difficult to get in on, but if well timed, you can zoom under the extending arm for quite a punish. The final triplet I found was in the Rotted Lake, surely one of Miyazaki's favorite locales. Almost certainly being inflicted with an HP draining debuff, or avoiding it by fighting on small platforms against a giant made another delightful wrinkle in his difficulty. Definitely a step up on the average scale, and might have been even harder had I encountered him earlier. Number 24, Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon. Cretans deep beneath your feet. The latest in FromSoft's adoration for extermination of mini-mobs en route to the actual boss, Rennala adds an interesting twist to the formula. Similar to the Deacon's Red Spirit, there's a singing scholar you must kill. This is signified by an audio cue, golden glow, and purple books flying from their direction. The others pose little threat other than periodic fire breath, though damage taken here does matter as it diminishes resources for later. Upon killing your third scholarly siren, Rennala's egg cracks and you're free to go balls to the wall and making an omelet. It's likely to take more than one go, so don't be too greedy as she charges her Lothric-style burst AoE. After her first plunge, she'll spirit away a few mobs to create giant homing magic. Making use of the bookcases around the arena to bait and block these helps a ton because they do hit quite hard. Once defeated, you might think it's over. Fortunately, this is merely the warm-up to the real battle. In one of the most stunning arenas of all time, Rennala summons her Moon Prism magic to take you on beneath its mesmerizing glow. Putting full stop punctuation on the magic you've faced thus far, Rennala employs an arsenal to rival Sir Gideon, only much earlier in the game. Her opener shows her Turtle Hermit teachings off to great effect, doing hefty damage if you get hit by it. Alternatively, it can be a great damage opportunity for you due to the long cast time if you're closer in. These openings are vital due to Rennala's propensity to float back quickly after casting, then fire off more magic. On a melee build, it makes finding the appropriate openings tough, all the more when she's firing homing soul arrows, boomerang spin blades, and a tracking explosive moon. Dodging all this simultaneously and finding a window of opportunity is overwhelming. At least the moon can offer a cheeky opportunity for a hit or two if you can evade the ensuing explosion quickly. All of this magic is potent on hit, but her deadliest attacks are the Ash summons. In my 3 attempts, I saw 4 wolves, a bloodhound knight, a giant troll, and flying Dragon Agheel. Yes, she summoned another full-fledged boss a la Velstadt in Elena's Dark Souls 2 bout. I appreciated that during these frightening distractions, her AI seemed inclined to let you fight the ashes and lay off the magic for a short time. The downside to her difficulty is with a little luck and smart positioning, this lax attitude lets you wail on her and evade the ashes completely, as they disappear quickly after their initial attacks. All in all, they brilliantly captured what it's like to fight a caster in both weaknesses and strengths. Rennala has a few too many of the former to be in the major leagues, but she's a solidly difficult battle for an early game brawl. Number 23, Godrick the Grafted. The first properly built-up boss of the game after Margit's failed ambush, Godrick attempts to fill his shadow by making you kneel. It brings me joy that he takes such indignation in a tarnish feigning the potential of lordship. He comes across as drunk with power, but an intense feeling underneath the madness that he's confident in his birthright and believes with every fiber of his being your existence is blasphemy. This collected nature comes through in his moveset. A more methodical pace compared to everything you've faced thus far, his combos are widely spaced alongside singular attacks with really long windups. He has that signature quick delivery after though, so learning dodge timings through memorization is key. It's also important to recognize his stance to know which combo he plans to use. With enough study, I realized he's best handled at moderate distance, baiting attacks then capitalizing on the aforementioned wide gaps at combo's end. His elemental attacks, on the other hand, are his difference makers. Earth is the standard get off me AoE common to many of the bosses in this game, while wind is a sudden spooky scramble. He'll either shoot off 2 blockable wind bursts or lunge in a tremendous dive. I played the wind shot safe, but preferred the slam as it was easy to dodge and punish. A passive-aggressive stance blends well into phase 2 when he takes a dragon head for a spin, incorporating fire and a savage grab into his offense. The grab has a good tell and needs to be dodged unless you're a fan of up-close and personal roastings. The other fire breath attacks can either be outranged or, if appropriately recognized in time, massively taken advantage of for your own openings. Godrick did an incredible job of teaching you how to take advantage on terms you're content with, while imposing enough strength to force you to test the limits of your comfort. Hitting slightly above the average, Godrick is the line at which difficulty begins to springboard upward. Number 22, Commander Niall. Originally, I thought very little of this rallying leader. I first encountered a variant of him in the overworld. With Torrent free to stay well out of his range and pick off the underlings he summoned safely, then himself, he was mimic tier difficulty. It wasn't until I faced him again in Castle Sol that I gained massive respect for the commander. He summons 2 Silver Knights, one with a great shield and the other a dual wielder. He's lax while you handle the duo, which is nice, but both are tough enemies with powerful weapon arts inflicting frostbite. Once defeated, rather than summoning more mobs, Niall summons his inner Nameless King with a lightning buff that continues to inflict frostbite. Taking more damage for mistakes is brutal, something you'll likely make in the face of his intense moveset. The brunt of it features his spear in a variety of combos. He also has a prosthetic claw on his foot that he'll imbue with lightning and do a slam or dash from the sky with. It does a ton of damage if you get hit, making dodge memorization essential. Rolling through and getting a counter seems like the obvious choice, but he has a backstrike with the hilt of his lance to stagger you. It's a cool counter to an opening that I haven't seen many bosses employ. His overall moveset does leave generous openings for well-timed evasion. That's easier said than done thanks to what made Nameless so challenging. He strikes in slow waves with timings that vary ever so slightly. What may seem like an opening after can quickly string into more attacks, ice whirlwinds, or fearsome lightning stomps. It's a lot to wager on every offensive gambit. Its difficulty is balanced quite well to test your skills, offering fair opportunity for success to those who can master his dance. Number 21, Loretta, Knight of the Haligtree. You may have gotten sneak peeks at Loretta throughout the game. Based entirely on the design of Tree Sentinel outside of a few magical additions, Loretta is the final barometer to test your mastery against that design. To be fair, she does have a variant at Carrion Manor, but I found her a little too late and destroyed her before I even realized what happened. Guarding the Haligtree area well into the endgame, she's much more potent here. Everything dangerous about the Tree Sentinel is echoed here. Incredible range and mobility, difficult to read timings, and unpredictable combos. Stacked on all of that are homing soul arrows, a Great Bow magic shot, an even greater Great Bow magic shot for triple the trouble after she uses magic to buff herself, which also adds more soul arrows, and she can fire them manually. It's a lot to deal with. If this was who I encountered right out of the gate, she would have demolished me for hours. Fortunately, experience against the Sentinel paid off. In addition, this design takes great advantage of your lack of form build early. Using my build centered on that very Sentinel's halberd, she showed just how much my skills had grown across my playthrough. That's not to say she wasn't tough, she definitely got her licks in, even destroying me once with a surprise 360 flourish jump on my first attempt. In my second, I dodged it perfectly en route to victory, which felt incredible. Whether beating rookies, guarding the gates to the capital, ganking you in groups outside the capital, or guarding the depths of the Haligtree with sorcery, the prowess of this wonderful design is nothing to take lightly. Number 20, Red Wolf of Radagon, the stronger magical beast. The love child of Sif, Great Wolf, and Big Hat Logan is completely boomer bust in difficulty. Its speed is insane, jumping in and out of melee range with ease. As it does, it readies a trio of delayed fire soul arrows. It can do this multiple times, including capping it off with its own mouth soul arrow. Making sure you delay your dodge caught me off guard more times than I'd like to admit, but it was dealing with them while the wolf quickly closed in to chomp you at the same time that caused headaches. Literally, as something its dash would do is flip my lock on completely, making me lose sight of the arrows and get obliterated while my head spun. It otherwise has bites and magical sword slashes with huge tells and fast delivery, a level of evasive difficulty I was not prepared for this early in the game. I said boomer bust at the outset because while all this offensive pressure is daunting, the counter in his design is its glass cannon HP. Sure, you might take a beating, but as long as you can heal through it, you'll by far win in a battle of attrition. What pushed this wolf high is its ability to combo ranged and melee together with tricky timings for a lethal combo. This is likely a boss I'd rate lower on a second playthrough, but as for the first, he shaved off enough lives to warrant a spot in the top 20. Number 19, Godskin Apostle. I first encountered this as a mini-boss in a windmill area, appropriate since he's likely to windmill his sickle to annihilate the greedy. The version guarding a divine tower is the real test. He has many shakeups to his combos to keep you guessing, which is quite imposing since the strings he uses can vary from 2 to 5 hits. He uses a 2-part attack, striking and then pulling in. If he catches you, he'll stun you and continue the combo, and since it comes from behind, it isn't safe to block both. His biggest boon is to bait his big jump attack for a few free hits, and that's about as good as it gets. He's extremely aggressive once in melee range, making it unsafe to hit him more than once or twice without preparing to counter his next assault. Playing it at range is never truly safe though, due to his Dark Fireball, which also makes healing quite difficult. Where this all becomes severely spooky is when he lights himself ablaze. I assume this would be your standard offensive buff with maybe some new combos. No. This Apostle prays to the Church of Mr. Fantastic. Look at those limber moves! Whirlwind attacks? How about you become the Whirlwind? In addition to the loop-de-loop, he mixes up previous attacks like the weapon twirl by charging into you while his lower half is grounded. I thought maybe I can get a few hits in, but then he sucked his butt into his face! When I saw that for the first time, I actually squealed. He caps off all of his spinning with a gargantuan fire AoE. It has a long tail, so don't greet it or feel the pain. Not only in direct damage, but persisting black fire that keeps sucking away HP for a time. His one saving grace is actually the butt suckage combo. If you evade the initial hit, then stand next to his front, his second hit is he yoinks his body and whiffs completely, allowing an unprecedented opening. Otherwise, you're gonna have to battle for every single opportunity in this fight. It's pretty tough, and it's only getting harder from here. Number 18, Elemer of the Briar. Yet another boss I face as a mini-boss prior, Elemer of the Briar moonlights as the Bell-Bearing Hunter. A special encounter received for traveling to certain graces at nightfall, you're awarded a bell for more shop items upon slaying him. Good luck with that though. When I encountered him early, I was woefully underprepared for his damage output, speed, and range. Range you say? He looks like he uses a greatsword. Yeah, and he can use it to telekinetically carve you like a pumpkin from the other side of the arena. The speed at which he does this mixed with variations in the timing of each hit makes it really difficult to dodge, especially when right after he can bash into you from miles away with his great shield. I consider this boss very similar to the Red Wolf. Offensively, he's a juggernaut if you let him take control. The only way I found to beat him was to go full balls greed and beat him to the point of getting a riposte, then continuing to melt him from there. This is an extremely risky strategy, relying on tight execution and reliable damage on your end. You might lose a few lives trying to do it, but I would say it's better than letting him slice and dice you while playing passively. If it weren't for the ability to melt him under the right circumstances, he'd find himself shooting even higher. As it stands, he's a great mark near the halfway point, though we've well extended beyond the average for difficulty already. Number 17, Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy. It may have taken a decade from Soft, but you finally did it. All the Storm Kings and Yorms of the world led to this very moment. A spectacle fight using a special weapon that delivers on both difficulty and quality. It was as simple as making a more natural weapon by having R1s, R2s, and a sick weapon art all be effective at considerable range, no matter your build. With less emphasis on positioning to get offense in, fight design centers completely around your respective offensive gambits. The Serpent's moveset isn't terribly complex. Swiping bites, a grab that you need to dodge dangerously late, head bashes, you know, what you'd expect. Well, then there's Poison Spit and Lava under him, which requires you to be somewhat aware of your position. You may have noticed that I have extensive HP and stamina. That's because this is actually one of the last bosses I fought in my entire playthrough, because for the life of me, after hours of searching, I could not find a way into this legacy dungeon. It's an important thing to note because sure, the HP helps, but the stamina makes a massive difference. Since I can attack at nearly any range, I can spam R1s relentlessly during openings and still have stamina to dodge. I should also mention that you have the option of upgrading the spear and returning. With Somber Stones only requiring one per upgrade, you could easily spare some of the many you'll find for an easier battle. Though I beat him both unupgraded and with it at +9, and fought him in the endgame, I still regard his difficulty highly for one reason. In Phase 2, his Enrage attack is ridiculous. Emperor Serpentine over here during the transition was apparently gurgling so bad because he had a billion skulls lodged in his throat. I guess we dislodged them because he rains them down for a long time, while still doing all of his attacks that accompany the phase. You also need to be wary of the encroaching lava, manage your stamina, and the sword attacks, and oh my god, it was overwhelming. Even at my level, I found it daunting. I can't imagine if I had fought this in the mid-game. Elden Ring offers flexibility to face bosses when you want to, so it's fair to evaluate him that way. As a compromise, I feel pushing him close to the top 15 is respectable, especially with those 15 being really challenging. But before we send off for today, ahead of featuring them in part 2, we've got one last spectacle fight to rival the Serpent in every way. Number 16, Fire Giant. FromSoft has been eternally obsessed with giants. From the Baron Archstone and Demon Souls all the way to now, seeing Miyazaki's modern vision for facing a titan is breathtaking. As you can imagine, facing something of colossal stature leads to blows of a similar caliber. Opting to use a bowl to clobber you, he'll slap, slam, and scoop snow to make getting into range quite tough. Once you pull it off, you can strike at his singed heel with makeshift protection. While being careful for him to roll away, taking your HP with him, you can break through. The stun provides a damage opportunity at the cost of him employing fire. He'll use a duo of fire spears at range and summon 2 flaming globes. These work exactly like Rennala's moons, with the exception they don't blow up on their own after a short time. You need to manually set them off, then dodge, making them a constant threat once they appear. These go a long way to preventing you from carelessly chomping at his heels, though I will admit the more I fought him, the more I got good at bobbing and weaving on horseback through it all to bash his jerkied ankle. If the usage of fire wasn't indicative of his willingness to push his limits to defeat you, one of the most jaw-dropping transitions ever should set aside any doubt. Ripping his foot off to remove his weak point and using it as motivation to open his third eye, you can now see his true face. This is one of the most twisted, disturbing, and amazing designs I've ever seen in this game. And somehow, the one-legged behemoth is more limber, rolling around like Sonic the Hedgehog while blasting you with fire. With no weak point, his tremendous HP bar is a lot more imposing here. I did notice that his wrists had a similar jerkied appearance, but I never went out of my way to hit them. That's because this phase is definitely easier. Assuming you remain a crotch goblin, you'll likely avoid his barrel rolls to the side. While Peppy would be proud, a significant part of his phase 2 offense whiffing is a big deal. He can summon big fire AoEs under himself to get you off for a time, but Torrent will swoop you back in with ease. With all this said, what elevates the giant this high is how easily control can shift in his favor. When you're in a groove, he could actually merit being more toward the bottom of the list. However, if he puts you on the ropes for even a moment, you'll start chugging through flasks like you've gone through a week of dehydration. He encapsulates the boomer bust balance of difficulty many of today's bosses provided, but in his case, it's a tango I thoroughly enjoyed. There is a lot more to come in this ranking alone. Elden Ring has some of the series' most grandiose battles with the most exceptional challenges. So be sure to subscribe to stay tuned for part 2. There's also mini-boss rankings coming, quality rankings, there's so much more coming. I love this game. On that note, I want to thank you for watching today. Much love to you, and I'll see you soon in part 2.